Good morning and welcome everyone to our Roadcheck 2017 webinar. My name is Christina Anderson. I'm a member of the Cork-Hill Safety Department, and at this time I would like to begin the webinar. The webinar will be 1 hour. It will be a presentation by Officer Bonney, followed by question and answer. If you have any questions during the webinar, please use the chat box, and as we move through the webinar, he will do his best to answer as many questions as possible. I'd also like to remind everyone attending to mute your phones if you haven't already done so. Also, please note that this Citrix service allows audio and other information sent during the session to be recorded, which may be discoverable in a legal matter. By joining this session, you automatically consent to such recordings. If you do not consent to being recorded, you may wish to end the session. I will be sending an email to all attendees with a link to the recording. The webinar is sponsored by Cork-Hill Insurance Agency. Our services include commercial insurance, personal lines insurance, employee benefits, human resources consulting, and safety consulting. This webinar is just one of the many value-added services we provide to our clients. We believe that keeping customers educated on trending health and safety topics and new regulations will prevent losses and protect their bottom line. And now I'd like to introduce our expert, Officer Lance Bonney. Officer Bonney is an Illinois State Patrol Sergeant in District 14 in Macomb. He returned to patrol a year ago after being the Deputy Chief of Staff for the Director's Office in Springfield from 2013 to 2016. Before that, Sergeant Bonney was assigned to District 14 in Macomb since 1996. In 2000, he became a commercial vehicle enforcement officer dedicated to commercial vehicle enforcement details throughout the state. In 2006, Sergeant Bonney became the lead instructor at the Illinois State Police Academy for size and weight enforcement. In 2011, he received federal certification as a North American Standard Truck Inspector Instructor, training Illinois State troopers and officers throughout the country in proper truck inspection techniques. Sergeant Bonney's accomplishments include being selected 4 times to represent Illinois in the North American Inspector Championship, where he finished 4th in the Level 1 Challenge in 2012, and in 2013 received the Team Award. In 2010 through 11, with the assistance and cooperation from the Midwest Truckers, Illinois Department of Transportation, Illinois Secretary of State, and the Illinois Truck Enforcement Association, Sergeant Bonney authored over 20 pages of new laws that clarified, modified, and codified trucking laws in the Illinois Vehicle Code. Additionally, Sergeant Bonney sits on the Board of Directors with the ITEA. And now, Sergeant Lance Bonney.
Good morning, and thank you for having me and putting on this webinar. I've been an instructor for over 10 years, and this is one of my second or third webinars, and so we'll get through this together. Hopefully there'll be no technical glitches. Everything should go pretty smoothly. Like Christina said, feel free to hit the chat at any time, and we'll try and keep this informal. It's a small group. We don't have hundreds and hundreds of people, so click on the chat if you have some questions. I'll either advise you that we can save that till the end, or I'll address it in a later slide, or it may be time to address it right at the moment. So feel free to hit those up anytime you have a question. We're going to talk to you about today getting through a roadside inspection with a focus on Roadcheck 2017. I've been an instructor for a lot of years to other law enforcement, to troopers at the ISP Academy, but to county and local officers in truck enforcement, to other state troopers. I've certified Alaska state troopers, Michigan state troopers, all over the country. But I have also done presentations, countless presentations in front of trucking companies and worked with truck drivers. I always try and get a good grasp of the audience, and I understand that everyone hearing me today is not a truck driver. You may be the CEO of the company, you may be the safety director, you're involved somehow in trucking, but you may not be the truck driver themselves. So hopefully the information I provide you is a little more global, not quite down in the weeds, so to speak, of stuff that you can advise your drivers and in being smart and getting through a roadside inspection successfully. This presentation is again by myself, Sergeant Lance Bonney. Christina already read the bio, so this has the same information on it. And what is Roadcheck? What exactly is Roadcheck? Well, it's a cooperative enforcement detail, commercial vehicle enforcement details performed by certified inspectors throughout North America. This is the 30th anniversary of Roadcheck. It is the world's largest enforcement detail. Having 22 years experience, I've worked a lot of enforcement details that may be one or two agencies, maybe in a geographic area, St. Louis, Chicago, but this is all of North America. During the first week of June, it's always the first week of June, 72 hours long, and it's run nonstop, and the idea is to focus on level 1 inspections, the full inspection, and then there's a concentrated effort on one area each year, and this year's focus is load securement. If you want to find out more information and details and you're unfamiliar, you can go to cvsa.org. CVSA is the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance. A lot of people believe that CVSA is the feds, and the reason why they're not is because it also governs Canada and Mexico in inspection techniques. So FMCSA, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, is the United States federal government arm that oversees the laws and regulations on proper inspection techniques. But CVSA works hand in hand with them and provides such things as the out-of-service criteria and our inspection procedures to try and keep things uniform and consistent. You're going to hear me talk about that a couple different times throughout this program. It's always been something I've been very passionate about because I do have a Class A CDL. I have done truck driving. I have driven locally, and a truck driver stopped in Elk Grove Village or Macomb, Illinois, Dallas, Texas, or Anchorage, Alaska should receive the exact same inspection techniques. While the states have different enforcement procedures, there may be a different court procedure or a different fine, the actual violations should all be the same and should be uniform. And so uniform and consistency is something that means a lot to me and that I always preach throughout our teachings. Some of our inspectors inspecting vehicles that goes on during Roadcheck. The objectives of this webinar, number one, psychological side, the human interaction with law enforcement. This is all too often overlooked. I've done countless presentations and spoken to people about the proper inspection techniques and what the driver needs, what the officer needs to do, and it's a very black and white legal approach, and we are going to talk about that today. However, there's a very human side to this because we are human, and when we make this stop and do this inspection, at a minimum, you're dealing with two people, an officer and a driver, and that driver is human, and so is that officer. They may be dealing with the loss of a loved one. They may be dealing with a divorce. They may be on top of the world because they're getting married this weekend or having a child. We all have the emotions that carry on to the inspection. And speaking to your drivers as much as and often as I speak to our officers, we actually started a year ago some specific training on this, understanding that psychological side and having a little bit of a human approach. And we're going to, again, talk about that some more in this PowerPoint. And then the legal side, understanding the roadside inspection and going over the actual procedures step by step. I hope everyone can hear me all right, and there's no problems. CMV uniformity, truckers, local, state, and fed. With nearly 22 years under my belt and having been federally certified, having a truck driver's license, working through the ITA with local and county officers, and then obviously being employed by the state police, I like to think that I'm kind of in all four brackets there, and it is something that is very paramount in the transportation industry. Most officers know when something really bad happens on the interstate, who's always the first to help out troopers? It's usually truck drivers. Truck drivers, for the most part, are professionals out there. They're out there doing a job. They are the eyes and the ears out on the road. They see crashes before most. They call them in. They see DUIs. They see stuff in truck stops, whether it's human trafficking, sex rings, whatever the case may be. For the most part, the trucking community is very good at offering assistance to law enforcement. And so that partnership is very important. And CVSA, the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, works just at that by putting together both industry and enforcement. The Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance is not an organization of just enforcement, and if you can envision, a boardroom filled with nothing but officers saying, okay, what regulation are we going to come up with next year to put against the trucking community? And it doesn't work that way. It's a cooperative effort, and the trucking organization, trucking industry themselves helps write the out-of-service criteria. And for the most part, most trucking companies want to do things right, and for obvious insurance reasons, want to reduce their liability and want to be a safe company going down the road. Having a mindset, this is something that I've used for quite a long time to talk to officers about, and I've extended it to the trucking community as well. What is the definition of a mindset? It's a set of beliefs or a way of thinking that determines one's behavior, outlook, and mental attitude. You think about that stop and, picture yourself, whether you were a driver or you still are a driver, what is that very first thing that happens when that officer kicks on those lights? There's an immediate, nervous feeling, whether it's butterflies or whatever you want to describe it as, but immediately you get the feeling inside you, wow, there's an officer behind me with lights on. And so you have to be in the mindset, talking to your drivers and preparing them. Having done over 6,000 inspections, one of the things I've noticed is the experienced truck driver has that mindset. They are very unshocked, if you will, when they get pulled over and you approach them and say, I'm here to do an inspection. They've been through it. They've got 20, 30, 40 years that they've been driving a truck, and they say, sure thing, today's my day, I'll go through an inspection, and there's usually no problems. Where we find problems is the inexperienced truck drivers. That doesn't mean young, it means young to trucking. How many people retire from their profession and then go drive a truck? I stopped a gentleman the other day, about 2 weeks ago, older gentleman, very polite. He was older. He was not in a brand new $200,000 truck. It was a nice truck. It was clean, but it was by no means phenomenal. It was just a modest tractor. He was operating over the road. He was from several states away. He was not a local driver. He came back to my squad with paperwork, and we're talking, and I said, how long you been driving? He said, only a couple months. I said, really? He said, yes, I'm retired. Turns out he was a retired business owner that owned an extremely successful multi-million-dollar business, and he had retired, and he was making jokes about having too many honey-do lists at home and just wanted to get out and see the country, and he enjoyed driving a truck. And I said, wow, I said, that's pretty interesting. So you never know who you're dealing with when you meet the individual. They could be old, they could be young, but they still may be new to trucking, and they may be unfamiliar with the inspection process, which was the case in this gentleman. a very successful multimillionaire business owner, but he tells me, I've never been through a DOT inspection, and I am very nervous sitting in your police car. So you have to have the mindset and the right attitude. The other thing we see with young, inexperienced drivers, they go through truck driving schools. They're taught 4, 6, 8 weeks of information, and somehow they think they've come out with a PhD in truck enforcement. And when you pull them over, they're going to tell me how to do my job. They're going to tell me the way it's going to be. They're going to tell me how they were taught. And by God, they know everything because they just finished and graduated from a truck driving school. And clearly that's the kind of behavior we want to try and curb and avoid, because 22 years and every day is a new experience for me. There is always something new to see and always something new to experience. Sometimes you stop a truck driver who has spent 20 years hauling hazardous materials, and he knows everything about hazmat and tankers, but now he's switched companies and he's hauling coiled steel. He is new, relatively new, to the process of the load securement of that type of freight. He's not new to trucking. He's not new to the inspection process. So having the right behavior, the right attitude, this is all things you can go over with your drivers, explaining to them that interaction with that officer is pretty paramount. Their actions, how they act roadside, the results, and then the performance, going through all these steps, having the good psychological attitude. Thing we explain to officers is respecting and understanding the trucking community as a whole. I often say that trying to understand trucking, you have to make sense of the nonsense, because a police officer is trained to question everything. It is in their nature to be curious. If you own cats, they always say curiosity killed the cat, and you see cats, they're snooping around, they're always into everything. That's what a police officer is trained to do. Just ask questions and be asking, why is this occurring? Does this make sense? Well, if you're not familiar with the trucking industry, and not all police officers are, it's not what they do day in and day out, they are not experienced in the trucking industry, a lot of what they see may be perceived as not making sense. For example, I see a lot of truck drivers who will choose to leave out on a Sunday when they have a load to be delivered on Monday. There's a multitude of reasons for that. Now, those who work 9 to 5, those who work typical, what we call normal, Monday through Friday jobs, to many of those people, they would say, why would you leave on Sunday? That's your family time. Get up Monday morning and go deliver that load. Well, why do the truck drivers do that? Why may they do that on a Sunday afternoon? Well, in checking logbooks, and again, having done so many of these inspections, you see reasons like, well, they just like to get a jump on things. They want to be at that yard first thing Monday morning, be the first one offloading. Or they're concerned they may have a breakdown. There may be bad weather. They want to leave on Sunday to arrive on Monday. Or, as in the case we see sometimes, maybe they leave out Sunday because they want to spend Sunday night with a girlfriend or a boyfriend or whatever the case may be. They're dealing with something outside of the normal family type routine that you may think of, but it's not criminal in nature, but it makes the officer, look at things. So again, it's all that interaction and understanding why we ask some of the questions we do, and trying to understand what is going down the road, what is this movement. So why do we stop trucks? Why does law enforcement stop trucks? And so many truck drivers, aren't exactly sure what is happening as they get pulled over. Hopefully, the audience that I'm speaking with, you're involved in safety meetings or some kind of interaction with your trucking companies, with your drivers, and you're talking to them about this. But this slide helps explain that a little bit better. Traffic-related offenses. The first reason would be traffic. That's obvious. truck was speeding, improper lane usage. Most of the people listening to me today are in the Chicagoland area. There is a lot of lane prohibitions. If you're in the outside lane, the passing lane, trucks aren't supposed to be out there. So, you have traffic-related offenses. There's a lot of push from the feds to law enforcement to be doing details on distracted driving, talking on the cell phone, texting on the cell phone, and these type of incidences require probable cause. And a local officer, a county officer, a state trooper, they can make these stops for traffic-related offenses. And this seems pretty obvious, but again, I'm walking you through the different reasons why a truck driver may come in contact with law enforcement. The next one is IBC Chapter 15, size and weight related issues. And this is different than traffic related because it does not require probable cause. This requires reasonable suspicion, and it is written in the law that overweight details can be established. Scales can be set up, signs can be put up, and all trucks are mandated to follow those signs and go to a scale and weigh if directed to. So Chapter 15 in the IBC regarding size and weight requires reasonable suspicion. For example, to compare the legal terms, what one would testify in court if there's any attorneys in there, probable cause means I've identified a violation, speeding. I've locked it in at 90 miles an hour. Before I've even made the stop, a crime has occurred. Running a red light, talking on the cell phone. An obvious crime has occurred, and I'm making a traffic stop to address it. Reasonable suspicion is there's a truck loaded with rocks. There's a truck loaded with steel coils. That truck may be overweight. I don't know this as fact until I weigh it. So I have reasonable suspicion based on my experience. Or I see a flatbed truck with a license plate good for 28,000 pounds. And I see a huge load on it, and I know from experience that that truck probably weighs over 28,000 pounds. So I cannot confirm at the time that a crime has occurred. I don't have probable cause, but I have reasonable suspicion, and therefore I can make the stop to determine, does this vehicle in fact weigh over the required amount that it says on the plate? So that's reasonable suspicion. The next one is to perform an inspection. This is what is done at Roadcheck, so it's done throughout the year. In the state of Illinois, only the Illinois State Police are certified to do this. A county or local officer cannot stop a truck without doing one or two, which is without probable cause or without reasonable suspicion for size and weight. Only the Illinois State Police can stop a truck. Stopping an empty truck, for example, that's clearly not overweight, is not speeding, but can still stop that vehicle to do an inspection. And the reason why the Federal National Inspection Program is random and is encouraged to be random is if you had a truck, let's say filled with 100 violations of all types, and the driver was trained, keep it right at 55, don't break any laws at all, then that truck would not be able to be inspected without probable cause. Well, commercial motor vehicles are subject to the inspection process. So the ISP, the Illinois State Police officers, are certified to stop a vehicle at any time without reason to perform an inspection. The next one, for criminal activity, probable cause coupled with articulable suspicion. I bring this up because I have many trucking companies or many truck drivers that call into headquarters, and they're not really complaining, but they are wanting to address, hey, my driver got stopped, and this was brought up. And then they wanted to climb in the back and look at this, and they did this, and they did that, and they want an explanation. And I'm providing you in advance that explanation. There are officers out there that are focused on looking for criminal activity. Hopefully my audience supports that notion and that we are removing criminals from the roadway and that we are looking for other than federal motor carrier safety violations, whether it is human trafficking, narcotics, illegal firearms, especially coming into the Chicagoland area. So an officer focused on criminal activity still needs to have probable cause to make a stop. They're going to need to establish some crime that has occurred, whether it's lane usage, lighting violation, speeding, etc. And then from there, again, try and explain to your drivers, explain to your safety officers, safety inspectors, etc., that criminal activity is, again, about the officer asking questions and wanting to know why. Let's take, for example, Naperville. You've got a small officer in Naperville. There's some businesses there that he is used to seeing these red trucks come in every Monday that say ABC. And these trucks he's used to seeing, he's familiar with them, and they're delivering products for a manufacturing plant there in Naperville. Of course, this is all fictitious. This is just an example. And he's been there for 10 years, and one day, it's Monday morning, and he sees blue trucks marked XYZ. And that's not the same red trucks he's seen making these deliveries every day. Now, what could that be? ABC bought a new truck, turned it blue, and called themselves XYZ. Yeah. Did they lose the contract? And did another trucking company get the contract? Sure, we see that every day. Or maybe he's wanting to ask questions, and maybe he realizes this truck isn't supposed to be here. This truck is saying he's going here to make a delivery, but he's really a load of narcotics. So again, going back to that initial thing on the mindset, making sense of the nonsense. That's why officers are trained to ask some of these questions, and that's why a lot of times, again, we get calls at headquarters, and trucking companies or truck drivers are wanting an explanation. Why did this happen? Why was my driver stopped and asked all these questions? Why was this? Why was that? Again, we're just trying to understand what is going down the road. The last point on this slide is unique and rare circumstances. I want to make you aware that the Department of Natural Resources, our conservation officers, they stop timber trucks. They actually are required to do some checks on the logs themselves. They're not truck inspectors, but they are required to verify some documents on the logs and pulpwood. USDA food shipments, refrigerated loads, USDA, of course, wants to verify that. I know a couple years ago they did a detail in Chicago due to certain trucking companies that were known for running their reefers set at 50 or so degrees to try and save money and weren't keeping the items properly below 32 and keeping them frozen. And then unfortunately there's crash investigations. This is a presentation of the insurance company, and crash investigations are unfortunately probably our least favorite time of coming together and meeting. But yes, we do get called to investigate crashes. And just so you all are aware that if you have a crash, say between a commercial motor vehicle and a car, and let's say the car clearly ran a red light or ran a stop sign, then the car is clearly not at fault, and say a local officer comes out or a county deputy comes out and handles that crash, the Illinois State Police may still be called, and it is our policy that we will still come out and do a commercial vehicle inspection on that unit, regardless of fault. It's not about determining the fault of how the crash happened. That's what the crash investigation's for, but the commercial vehicle inspection will be done at a crash involving a commercial motor vehicle. All right, going through on the legal side of things, understanding the level 3 inspection procedure. What I'm going to do is I'm going to jump through 2 or 3 slides, and then we'll go back and I'll explain why I'm doing this. But there are 3 types of inspection. There's actually 8 types of inspections. Due to time, we're not going to go through all 8 types. They do not involve you on a regular day-to-day basis. What you're going to deal with day-to-day is the level 1, the level 2, and the level 3. The level 3 is basically called the driver paperwork check only. Every Illinois state trooper must graduate the academy certified to do a level 3 inspection. They then must maintain the minimum amount of inspections each year to achieve their federal certification, or they have to go back through the class. So officers do, every state trooper can do a level 3 inspection that is out on the road. The level 2 inspection includes a level 3, but then also includes the walk around, where you're looking at lights, tires, load securement, parts and accessories of the truck. The level 1 inspection is everything on the level 2, but it includes the undercarriage. So the officer will climb underneath on a creeper or using a pit and will inspect furthermore underneath the undercarriage, checking the frame, suspension, and measuring brakes. The process for an officer to be certified in this, this is what Christine explained earlier, that I'm certified to instruct. The level 3 inspection procedure is a 40-hour course. It's a 40-hour course that they must complete, receive an 80+% on the exam to pass, and then they are certified at level 3, provided they do their appropriate number of inspections. The second week, a second 40-hour course, focuses on the nomenclature and parts and accessories of the vehicle, and that is the level 1 inspection process. So, level 3 inspection procedure, as you see here, has 13 steps. We go to the level 1, well, 1 through 12 is the level 3. So this was the list you just saw. If you notice, if I go back one slide, 13 is completing the inspection paperwork. Well, if we remove that and take 1 through 12, put them up here, and then we go from 13 to 24 all the way down to 37, there's completion of the inspection. That is a level 1 inspection procedure. Again, this is an 80-hour course. To describe this to you in detail would take at a minimum of 2 to 4 hours. So believe me, I'm going to be going pretty fast over the next about 10-15 minutes. I basically wanted you to see the inspection procedures. There are 13 steps to the level 3, and there are 37 steps to the level 1. I'm not here to make you mechanics. I'm not here to certify you as inspectors. Hopefully my audience, again, sits at a little more of a elevated platform, being, again, a safety director, a CEO, or in management, or guiding the other drivers in your company or for your companies that you oversee. So this is something that I hope you're able to take home and bring back to the drivers and share with them on getting through the inspection. And again, it doesn't focus as much on making you an inspector as it is making you a smart getting inspected process, getting through that. Getting through the level 1. All right, steps 1 through 4. These are some critical steps. Again, when those lights come on, there's an immediate nervous factor, and officers know that. We're well aware of the fact that there's just that immediate, nervous factor. They call it the oh darn factor. There's a better word for it, but I'm trying to, maintain appropriate language. But what do you want to do? How do you want to address that? We see truck drivers see the lights come on, they slam on the brakes, and they stop in the middle of the road. Now, most of you might be chuckling among yourselves saying, can't believe someone would do that. Yes, it happens all the time. They see the lights come on, and that's what they must have been taught to do, slam on the brakes, stop literally in the middle of the road. When you stop in the middle of the road, aside from creating a road hazard, what must the officer do now? The officer must now walk up on the yellow or dotted line, because they've stopped in the middle of the road, and be right there dealing with oncoming traffic. It's a road hazard to everybody. So instruct your drivers. The second they see the light, turn on your four-way flashers and then slow down. Maybe the officer flipped around and he's on a call. He's actually not stopping that truck. So don't slam on the brakes, stop in the middle of the road. Don't slam on the brakes and pull over in a soft shoulder. In the last 2-3 weeks, I think Illinois has its fair share of rain. I'll bet there's a lot of shoulders out there that wouldn't support an 80,000-pound truck. So turn on the four-way flashers. That indicates to the officer, I know you're back there. Now I'm going to slow down. Not slow down to 2 miles an hour, but we're going to drop 10, 15, 20 below the speed limit. If you're on the interstate, 40, 45, right at the minimum speed limit, and find a safe place to pull over. Find a safe place where there's a shoulder, where there's a side road, somewhere where you can safely pull over. Many officers, especially during road check, the officers that are trained in level 1 are experienced commercial vehicle enforcement officers. Experienced officers like myself, we're not even going to turn on our lights until we know where there's a safe place. We may follow a truck literally for 2-3 miles and wait to put on our lights because we know past this 2-mile stretch of guardrail, the shoulder opens up. Be cognizant of the officer's approach to the vehicle. Do not exit the vehicle unless told to do so. There was a very old school mentality, and I find old drivers that do this, and I've been told southern states still do this. They ask the driver to get out of the vehicle and come back. Here in Illinois and in most northern states, we want the driver to stay in the vehicle. It's safer for him or her. Do not exit the vehicle. We have countless training videos showing drivers that step out of the vehicle because they are nervous about being pulled over, because they have tunnel vision, they psychologically are unaware of traffic, and they literally step right out into a moving car. This has happened time and time again. Officers are trained to be aware of their surroundings and aware of oncoming traffic. Instruct your drivers, stay in the vehicle, make eye contact with them in those big rear view mirrors. Don't be climbing in the back, climbing down the passenger side, trying to dig up paperwork or whatever. Sit there looking at the officer in the mirror. Be cognizant that that officer is approaching. And do not exit the vehicle unless you were told to do so. At a scale house, you may be instructed, get out, bring your stuff into the scale house. Be prepared. The initial contact with the officer sets the tone for the inspection. This is actually in the federal training guidelines given to officers, that initial contact sets the tone for the entire inspection. Again, what is it saying? It's saying there's 37 steps that are very black and white legally, but what's going to set the entire tone? Something that is not even related to legality. It's the human interaction. It is that simple human interaction. I made a stop one day on a driver. It's been several years ago. I walked up to the truck, and the driver was extremely short with me, extremely frustrated, not happy that he was being stopped. And I made the comment to him that I was just here to do an inspection. I said, relax. I said, we'll get through this. I said, unless you have some obvious problem that you already know about, why are you so upset? He said, well, this is not my lucky week. I said, why is that? He said, I was inspected 17 hours ago in Pennsylvania, and he hands me 3 citations that he was written in Pennsylvania. And he said, and 72 hours ago, I was stopped in Ohio and inspected. Well, a further computer inquiry would have told me all that. But on my initial approach, on the initial traffic stop, I have no idea if this guy has been stopped 10 times in the last week or 1 time in the last 10 years. And so again, let your drivers know that we're just there to do an inspection. We've got a job to do. You've got a job to do. And we respect each other for the most part. That initial contact sets the tone for the inspection. I make it a point to tell officers to be observant You want to look for anything that shouldn't be. This is all obvious. However, look at the truck. If the truck has 10 pictures in the dash of his or her kids and family and maybe the star football player or his daughter in ballet or whatever the case may be, well, what's that telling you? Well, it tells me that's his issued truck. It tells me that he drives that truck pretty regularly. It tells me he's a family man. He's proud of his children. So I'm going to make a comment about that. You know, extend some human interaction. Oh, I see you got a star football player. Oh, that's my nephew. Or, yeah, that's my son. I'm proud of him. He graduated this year. Take the time, to speak to your drivers about the human interaction with the officer. It sets the entire tone for the inspection. The next thing is knowing the who, the where, the why, and the what of your operation. Make sure you are taking the time to go over with your drivers what they're doing out there. Now, this seems extremely silly, for lack of better terms, but in today's world, the scenario I give is I own 2 trucks, and I've got a friend that lives down the road, and he needs a job. So I put him in my truck. I've got him driving my truck. I own the truck. And I give him a paycheck every week. As far as he knows, he drives for me, Lance Bonney. Problem is, I've taken my 2 trucks and I've leased on to Corkle Insurance Company. Corkle Insurance Company has 10,000 trucks. They run all over the country. And they have a separate flatbed division that hauls steel coils. And under that, they're called CL Incorporated. And so now the officer pulls over this driver. Well, who are you operating for? Where are you going? I drive for Lance Bonney. Well, I don't see that name on the side of the truck. Well, that's who writes my checks every week. Well, where are you going? I don't know. I just started for the guy. I was told to pick up this load and bring it to Palatine. Have you ever been here before? Nope. Well, where are you going after this? I don't know. I'll wait for a call from dispatch. This is pretty routine. With the lease agreements between trucking companies bouncing from one different ownership to different lease agreements, we have a lot of times scenarios where the drivers really barely know what's going on. And God forbid they're in a horrible crash and their life flight is somewhere, they're unconscious. How are we to gather all the important information? How are we going to know? This is something you need to take time to educate your drivers on. Who is the carrier? Who are you working for? Where are you going? What is the purpose of this movement out here? Okay, getting through level 1, moving on. Steps 5 through 9. That's gathering of the documents. This is probably the #1 area that you can have in your position, the audience here, working with your drivers and their trucking company. One of the most important and influential pieces of the inspection process. I cannot emphasize this enough. I have brought this point up for 20 plus years. If I pull over a truck driver, when that truck stops, it's not what? Not making money. When the wheels aren't going round and round, it's not making money. And I pull over that driver, I'm trying to respect his time, the company time, and he says to me, you know, I had to be at St. Louis at 2 o'clock for this delivery. You're going to make me late. Sir, I respect that. I'm going to try and get you through this inspection as fast as I can. Let me see your paperwork. And the driver has wadded up paperwork in the side pocket of the door, filled with spit out chewing tobacco, wadded up paperwork in there that's been rained on, garbage in it, smushed Mountain Dew cans. Then he reaches over in the glove box, pulls out paperwork, and says, well, I'm not sure what all you need, trooper. I'm trying to respect your time, and this driver hands me a registration from 1982, hands me an IFTA from 2013, hands me an annual inspection from 2009. This is not helping out the situation. aside from the human interaction, which sets the entire tone for the inspection like we talked about, the gathering of documents. If you have a nice, neat binder, again, going back to the God forbid you're in a crash and someone's unconscious, the officers, the EMTs, the firemen, grab that binder. It has everything you need. A lot of trucking companies have these very nice binders, but the problem is you open up the binder and there's 2009 registration, 10, 11, 12, 13, all the way up to 18. These documents aren't worth anything. If you think they are, sell them on eBay. To us, we just need the current registration, all the current paperwork, the IFTA, the annual inspections. Have someone in your office go through these booklets, make them nice, neat, organized, and it makes the entire inspection process go so much smoother. Again, gathering of documents is an important and influential piece of the inspection process because, again, this is the office. This is the driver's office. What does it say about the trucking company when it's in such disrepair and disarray and there's paperwork everywhere? What does it ultimately say? So have a nice binder. The other parts of this step, 5 through 9, hazmat. If there's hazardous materials on board, obviously you know that there's certain requirements you're required to have. The bills of lading accessible, your ERG book. Have this type of stuff available. You'd be surprised. I have drivers, sir, I need to see your ERG book. They call the company. Company tells them, oh, we put it in the 3rd drawer back in the sleeper. So that's not going to do good in emergency that the driver wasn't even trained. Where's the ERG book at? These are simple things that take the time to go with your drivers. The driver's license, this is an obvious one, but we're going to check, verify the driver's license. Medical documentation, carrier identification. Carrier identification falls back on the whole scenario I gave you a couple slides ago when I talked to you about having your drivers know the who, what, why, when, and where. Sorry about that. Carrier identification. Make sure your drivers know who they operate for. This has not been a smaller issue as it's become a bigger issue as time goes on. There are more conglomerates. You have more and more 5 trucks are leased onto a company with 100 trucks. Those 100 trucks are leased onto a company with 500 trucks. There's more and more of these going on virtually every day. Make sure your driver knows who the carrier is and make sure your truck is marked properly. If you own a truck and half the year you drive for ABC Trucking and half the year you drive for XYZ Trucking, make sure you have the proper magnet signs or whatever it takes that you put over those to properly mark it. Getting through the level 1, steps 10 and 12, logbook. We can have your drivers been trained? Is it up to date? And with the e-logs coming about, make sure your drivers are familiar with how to operate them. We're still seeing a lot of drivers that tell us, well, we don't know how to operate it. We got these new fancy things. They're supposed to do it on their own. No, they're supposed to walk us through it and know how to properly operate it. Okay, step 12, annual inspection. You have to have your vehicle safety tested. You've probably seen a sticker similar to this. Some are white. Where does the law say the sticker has to be? It doesn't. Some put it on the inside, some put it on the outside, some put it on the right side, some put it on the left side. Train your drivers to know where they're at so they can point them out to the officer so that you don't get written up for an infraction of not having your vehicle safety tested. Getting through the level 1 continued. 14 through 37 is the vehicle inspection. Again, I'm not here making mechanics. We're not going to get into brakes and tires and air hoses and steering. Just listen to the inspector's guidance. Make sure the driver stays seated, sits with the driver listens to what he's being asked to do and follows through with those directions. Be familiar with parts and accessories and controls. I am surprised at how many drivers don't know some very basic parts and accessories. Air valves. What do these 2 valves do? They're a pretty critical component. And when I explain what I want those drivers to do with those valves, I still have some drivers that aren't quite sure which one to push, pull out, or what to do. What do these valves do? Make sure they know proper operation. Getting through the level 1, cargo securement. This year's focus is cargo securement. Again, I've got a question here I'm going to look at. How do I bring that back up? That disappeared so fast. Well, I'm going to move on. We'll try and hit that again at the end unless there it is. Is the driver given something in writing after the inspection with details of what needs to be done? Absolutely. Absolutely. The inspection process is receiving an actual inspection, and they will receive a printed document with all the violations. The violations will then have a column for warnings and tickets. That is strictly on the state side. Each and every state has their own protocol for issuing warnings or tickets. What's important to you is in that far left column, what are the infractions? What are the violations that need to be addressed? So yes, they are required, we are required to give an inspection report. They are required to turn in the inspection report to their motor carrier. Going back to cargo, I hope that answered the question. Going back to cargo securement, commodity specific, there are specific commodities. If you're in the transportation industry, trucking industry that has commodity specific cargo securement, then know them. Intermodals, flatbeds, steel coils, heavy equipment, automobiles, timber, dress lumber, concrete pipe. In the federal regs, these are specific types of freight that have to be secured a specific way, and it's spelled out. General freight is anything that's not commodity specific, and where we find the violations here is the driver doesn't know that we're looking at multiple things. For example, tie downs proper and defective. If a chain is snapped or broken, well, then the drivers are pretty obvious. They know, oh, I've got a broken chain. But what if they don't have enough? Are they proper? If you have a tiny little chain trying to hold 40,000 pounds, they may not have the right type of chain or securement. And then the required number of tie downs for the load. You could have a 5,000 pound load with a 40,000 pound chain that's definitely is strong enough to hold it, but by the regulations, it may need a minimum of 2, 3, 4, 6 tie downs. So there's other requirements on the required number of tie downs. I stopped the truck earlier this week. It was a flatbed hauling a small dump truck. So there's a dump truck on the flatbed. He had a chain in the front and 2 chains in the back, total of 3 chains. He was telling me how heavy duty this chain was. And I said, that's fine. It will meet the weight requirement, but at a minimum, a heavy piece of equipment, a dump truck, has to have 4 tie downs. You have to have 4 by the requirements, a minimum. Working load limits, that's checking your weight ratings, and then spilling, shifting, tarped, or unsecured load. We're going to be looking at. Of course, you don't want anything that could shift or come apart. The pictures here show load lock. This is just kind of a humorous example of some of the stuff you see out there. Getting through the level 1, out of service. Moving along pretty good in the interest of time. Like I discussed with Christina, these presentations can fly by in an hour. I'm used to doing week-long presentations, and I've tried to be expeditious, but it's moving along pretty good. Out of service. An out-of-service violation is something that's put out each year by CVSA. It is an enhancement of an obvious violation, and it requires the vehicle or the driver to be stopped, removed from the roadway, and that problem be addressed, whether it be a flat tire, or it's 2 o'clock in the morning and the vehicle has no lights, or the driver doesn't possess a CDL, or whatever the case may be. If your vehicle or driver are placed out of service, what we've experienced over the years is a truck may be going from California to New York, and he has the unfortunate pleasure of passing through Illinois and getting placed out of service. And immediately the driver's upset, amped up, you're shutting me down right here. And then he makes the calls to the companies, and the companies want to plead with us. Well, let us go here. Let us go do this. Please, make sure your companies are aware it's liability. If the defect has been identified and it goes down the road and God forbid gets in a crash or something happens, not only is the company and the driver liable, but now I am. I've inspected you. I found a violation and said, oh, you know what, have a nice day, go down the road. Absolutely not. Please, please make sure your companies, your drivers are on board with the idea if there's an out of service, it may be a unique situation. Maybe it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Maybe it's unfortunate, but it could be a lot worse because you're not at some fatal crash. So if you get stopped and placed out of service, for liability's sake, understand we're going to have to call someone out, a repair truck. It's going to have to be addressed. Maybe send out a different driver. Maybe that load's not going to get there till the next day, whatever the case may be. Have a plan. I have put a lot of trucks out of service, and they're experienced. They pick up the phone. They call their dispatch. Dispatch calls safety. Safety has a plan. They've already got a repair truck en route, and it's all addressed. No issue. No harm, no foul. Everybody's good with it. It's the trucking companies that do not have a plan that then are running around trying to figure out what are we going to do. These are some out-of-service violations. The common one, ruptured airline. And then CVSA, they are the ones that put out the out-of-service criteria in 2017. It come out April 1 of every year. So we log in and we go through it, see what the new items are, the new changes, and then we all get a booklet. When I say we, every single certified inspector gets an out-of-service criteria booklet to carry in their squad to see what the enhancements are and what is going to place a vehicle or driver out of service. And yes, you may have to be towed. We know tow bills are expensive, but it may have to be addressed. This is my contact information in our commercial vehicle office. This concludes my presentation. I really had hoped to go through this in about 40, 45 minutes and leave the rest open for questions, but wow, about an hour has passed. So if you have any questions, feel free to hit the chat. I'm going to stay logged on here for the next 10, 15 minutes, and I'll be glad to entertain any questions. I appreciate your time. I hope you've all gleaned something from this, and thanks for having me.
And I would like to thank Sergeant Bonney. That was an excellent presentation with loads of great information to keep everybody safe out there. I am going to go ahead and take back the presentation. Okay, and I don't see anything in the chat, so certainly everybody, if you have any questions, feel free to email me afterwards. I'd be happy to get in touch with Sergeant Bonney, and that concludes our webinar for today. Thank you very much.